bringing you all the latest Nottoway County High School and Bearcat sports each week.
10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45.
Starring Erin Sorensen and John Dykstra on the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast.
He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field.
Coming to you from the campus of Northwest Missouri State University. Welcome back to another edition of the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast. I'm Erin Sorensen with my co-host,
John Dykstra.
And we're going to kick it off this week right away. We're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to start right into our Athlete of the Week. John's going to bring us his pick first.
A little bit off of the football beaten path here. We're going to go with a Spoofhound soccer player, Thomas Distefano. If you paid attention to Spoofhound soccer, especially last year, you recognize that name. He had 7 goals in the season opener, 10-2 win, and they played 3 games so far this season, and as a team they went to the championship of the Barstow tournament, which is a lot of private schools and a lot of bigger schools. They ended up losing to Platte County in the final of that by 1. Thomas had 10 goals total in the tournament, really played well for them. But Erin, I know you have somebody who a lot of people took notice of this week.
Yeah, it was actually quite a big week for our local sports everywhere, but Bearcat football got its start here at home against Missouri Western, and we did have some of those guys that we were wondering how they were going to play, first-year guys, and one of our redshirt freshmen, starting quarterback Braden Wright, he's going to be my Athlete of the Week. He really came in. He had some moments where you could tell it was nerves and things happened, but he played just like a great quarterback, a kid who's confident with the ball. It definitely helps that he does have those great receivers on his sides, but he went 3 and out on the first run, but then he came right back, settled in, and it really looked like he was comfortable with what he was doing, and I think a lot of that comes with Coach Rich Wright. Sean Bain also mentioned he loves playing with Braden. Just those guys that have confidence in Braden. John, what did you kind of see from him that really made you feel like, okay, this is the kid that's going to do some great things for us this season?
Well, he talked about it after the game. It was ugly sometimes. There was a little bit of sloppiness, but Braden just kind of made things happen out there with his running ability, his athleticism to extend plays, and they were really a big play offense. He had a couple of bombs deep to Sean Bain, as you mentioned, and then to Jamie Taylor as well. He just made things happen out there with the way he was able to create with his legs and really just throw the ball deep downfield.
And I think that's one of the things that we definitely talked about last week. Speed across the board with this team. Braden really fits in because he is that athletic quarterback, and that's what we need to fit into this offense, like you said. But what did you see from this week overall as a team? Obviously, Braden was great. Bearcat fans should be happy to see that there was rough times, like you said, but I think he's going to fit in well. What else did you see from the Bearcats that show you positive signs for the upcoming season?
Well, Rich Wright talked about it nearly every time I or anybody else in the media talked to him this summer. Just the need to add those playmakers to the offense. The Griffins really loaded up to stop the running game this week. You could tell maybe it was a little bit of a pride thing, I'm sure. They didn't want Josh Caldwell to beat them. So they were going to make Braden make some plays. We saw some of those other playmakers he has step up. Like I mentioned, Jamie Taylor had the first touchdown of the game, a 50-plus yard touchdown where Braden just threw it out there beautifully and let him run under it because he was frankly faster than anyone else on the field. Sean Bain might argue that, but that's a conversation for another day. But the big play ability where they had some drives that kind of stalled out and did nothing, but every once in a while they were able to hit that big, whether it was a run by Braden, a touchdown run late, or those big passing plays. They were just able to kind of knock the top off the defense there, and that's promising going forward because you assume with the freshman quarterback that consistency is just going to develop over time.
And I definitely think, like you said, consistency will come over time. One of the things that I thought was really cool, kind of non-football related, when you talk to some of these coaches after the game, they talked about the crowd. And obviously it's the home opener, it's against Missouri Western, so it's a big deal. People are going to come out. They said they had over 8,700 people in attendance, and me being the stats nerd that I am, I looked it up. In 2016, when they won the MIAA conference and the NCAA championship, they averaged 6,912 people in the stands. So Bearcat fans really poured out this year. There were some Missouri Western fans in the crowd, of course.
Not that many, though.
Yeah, not that many. How much do you think that helps these guys, especially these younger guys, to have that crowd behind them, pushing them forward?
I think it just pumps them up. I tweeted at one point during the game because Josh Caldwell scored on a little screen pass, and the Bearcat fans, the student section, band particularly, started chanting, "He's a Bearcat." And just for a guy like Josh to kind of see that and be welcomed in like that, that's got to be a great feeling for him. Yeah, I expect nothing less of the Northwest crowd as we go here, but that was definitely great to see from everybody who came out on Thursday night.
And it was electric. Not that it ever isn't, but it just felt really loud in that stadium. But let's flip to the other side of the ball. Defense for the Bearcats was a big deal this week. What did you see from them, John, good and bad, maybe, that we can take into the next few weeks?
There wasn't a lot of bad on the field. They were kind of bend but don't break, which we're not really used to seeing. We're just used to seeing them completely shut people down. But they really made life difficult on Western quarterback Don Marino. Ostanescu was back there a lot. There were a lot of guys that were getting solid, consistent pressure, and the linebacking core was fantastic. People know about Ben Altoff and Nick Hess because they're returning starters and two of the best in the nation. But Andy Hessler came in and had 3 tackles for loss in the first half. He was just flying all over the field and taking advantage of maybe kind of being the third guy in that, and not somebody who jumps off the scouting report for offenses to see what they have to do. But he really complimented Ben and Nick really well, and I thought it's a sign of good things to come for Andy, who's just a junior, and once Ben and Nick graduate next year, he'll kind of be the leader of that linebacking core.
Yeah, and what an incredible athlete to say, like you said, kind of being the third guy. And Andy Hessler, he packs quite a bit of a punch for being that third guy. So it was definitely a good week for the Bearcats overall with this first game getting started. The final score was 28-6. Next week they head to Washburn. John, what are you thinking next week? What do you think they'll carry over or change, or what do they need to do next week?
Washburn's kind of they're an interesting team. We saw last year that game was a lot closer than people expected after really whipping up on Emporia State in the opener last year, and then we went to Washburn and the offense struggled, everything. They're one of the more consistent defensive teams in the league historically. I expect it to be a little bit lower scoring, but with the dynamicness of Wright and everything that goes with them, it's hard to see them not hitting a couple of those big plays again. So hopefully we see a similar script and a few big plays on the offensive side and maybe an even more dominant performance by that defense.
Yeah, and every day that Braden Wright gets a notch in his belt, so to say, with this first game underway, I think we expect to see, like you said, more consistency from him as we go and from the whole team overall.
And what I liked from him was just how humble he was about it after the game too. We were kind of buttering him up because I don't know if, as the media, we hadn't seen him in a real game yet. I don't know if we were prepared to see what all he brought to the table. And then after the game, we asked him about confidence and how much that's going to help, and he really deflected it and didn't want any of the credit for it. That just bodes well because that means he's not going to kind of just take this and think, hey, now I'm the starting quarterback. I've accomplished what I need to. He definitely seems like the type of kid that's just going to keep trying to get better.
Yeah, and like you said, I like the way he handles himself, and he doesn't just settle in that spot of the starting quarterback. He wants more, and getting the starting spot for him seems like it isn't his number one goal. His number one goal is the team and where they want to go this year. But let's look ahead into some more Bearcat sports that have been competing this week. Obviously, we talked about Bearcat volleyball last week. They started out hot with the 4-0 start. Maddie Bruder was my athlete of the week last week. This week, they had a little bit of a tougher outing. They went to the Rockers Classic. They went 1 for 3. But definitely mention Maddie Bruder. She's going to come up again through most of this season. She was named Rockers Classic All-Tournament Team. She had 71 kills in 4 matches, so she was very good for them again this week. I don't take this 1 for 3 too seriously. Losses come, especially when you're doing these long road tournaments. But one of the big things that I saw was one of the freshmen, Rachel Sturdivant. She came in, she played very well. She was notching 7 kills, against Sioux Falls, 9 kills against Colorado Mesa, and 11 kills against Rockhurst with a couple blocks. So that's very exciting for the Bearcats to see that. So, John, you saw some more Bearcat sports this week. What did you see from Bearcat soccer?
Yeah, the Bearcat soccer, we talked about the crowd for Bearcat football. A lot of people came out beforehand and came out to the soccer game, which was great to see. And if they did, they got treated to a good one with William Jewell. Bearcats ended up winning that game 2-1. They rallied. They fell behind 1-0 to start. Came back with a couple goals, including a game winner from former Spoofhound Molly Holtman. And it was just a good, hard-fought game. First-year coach Mark Gordon got his first career win as a Bearcat. He talked about their heart and how they came out, and they really battled in that game. And it's a sign of good things to come.
Yeah, it's good to see with all of our Bearcat sports kind of getting good starts. But let's go to the local area high school sports, one of the big-time favorites for our listening area, Spoofhound football.
They needed a bounce back, and they got it against Harrisonville. Going into the season, honestly, if you were ranking these first two games, I thought maybe we'd see the reverse and we'd see a really tough game against Harrisonville and hopefully a little bit more of a blowout against Blair Oaks. But really, they came out and bounced back from that disappointing Blair Oaks game to thoroughly dominate Harrisonville.
You know, it's quite exciting, like you said, to see them bounce back. And obviously, there is a big fan base for the Spoofhounds as well. We talk about the Bearcats, but man, people love their Spoofhounds. Let's see, remind me, how many wins have they had in this Hound Pound?
Yeah, 54 straight wins in the Hound Pound now, and I don't see that ending, frankly. Knock on wood here, but they're pretty dominant when they get that home crowd behind them. And there was we talked about Bearcats and we talked about soccer, just having a lot of crowd. I don't think there was an empty seat in the Hound Pound on Friday night for that one, and people really got their fill of football over this week with a couple night games on Thursday and Friday. Maryville came out and they did what they like to do. They ran the ball with Tyler Houcha and Eli Dallas. They kind of just came out and they did what they did and ran behind a rapidly improving offensive line. That was something we talked to Eli Dallas after the game, and that was something he brought up right away, was the offensive line, the growth in just 1 week was pretty incredible.
With the 54 straight wins in the Hound Pound, that I missed that earlier, that is incredible for them in itself. And obviously the Spoofhound team, they always want to be successful, but I think that adds to them wanting to protect their home field. And like you said, it was kind of a muddy, wet game with the weather and everything, but you don't know that affects the Spoofhounds by looking at them, watching them play in 36-0. How did they handle that so well? And Harrisonville, well, obviously the defense had a big part in it, but Harrisonville didn't play as well in those conditions.
They were just able to get that early lead, and once they get that, like I said, when you have two all-state running backs in the backfield, and Connor Weiss, I should mention too, he had a touchdown out of it. He's just a sophomore. He's kind of the future of that backfield. You see him as that future H when Eli graduates this year. But he ended up with a touchdown, and Eli also praised him a lot. But they were able to get behind that offensive line, and once they got the lead, just keep building it. And the offensive line performance was really, really impressive. They had 2 injuries on the line going into this week. Jackson Braham ended up playing and toughing it out, but he had a shoulder injury that held him out of practice all week. He's a starting left guard. And then right tackle, Ben Holtman, we don't quite know the extent of his injury yet, but he was on the sideline in crutches, so they had 2 replacement starters on the offensive line. They just came out and they ran the ball in the mud, and really Harrisonville had no answer.
And that really speaks to this Spoofhound team, moving guys around that don't usually play positions that they usually play, and they still go 36 and out. We've talked about the offense a little bit. Once they get that first score, they really go. What do they need to continue doing throughout this season to be successful, to make sure that they keep really just kind of essentially punching the ball down their opponent's throat?
Well, they've got their offense that Matt Webb and Matt Houchin run there with the wing T look, and I mean they're not going to change. They're going to give it to Tyler up the gut, to Eli up the gut too, but also Eli around the outside and Connor. the continued development of the passing game is huge, but when you're talking Spoofhound football, it's always going to come down to the running game, and they've got a pretty good one going right now.
Yeah, and those two guys, like you talk about, Eli and Tyler, they have been nothing short of incredible for the Spoofhounds. I'm new to Spoofhound football, so I'm still kind of getting caught up here, but those two guys, man, I hear about their names all the time, so I know they're making big contributions. Now, next week, I believe Chillicothe comes to town for the Spoofhounds. What's that going to be like?
Chile is a little bit of a mystery coming into it because they won their opener. They lost a lot from a team that beat Maryville in the regular season last year before they lost to Maryville in the playoffs. A lot of people would have considered that kind of the de facto state championship game because both those teams were so good last year, and when Maryville pulled that upset, it really kind of blew the doors wide open for that playoff run. They lost a lot of those talented playmakers from last year. They started the season 1-0 and then had a setback this week with a blowout loss to Kirksville, a team they blew out last year. But you can never overlook Chillicothe. They've got that football culture there.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what the Spoofhounds have their eye on. And like you said, with two pretty good football programs, and the Spoofhounds looking to defend, which would be 55-game winning streak in the Hound Pound with this win over Chillicothe, and I'm sure Chillicothe is going to be trying to come for that as well.
They definitely got some, after how it ended last year and them thinking that they were set up to be the one hosting that state championship trophy at the end of the year. They certainly have reasons to be motivated for it, but like I said, they have just so many new players on that team, or new starters at least, and a new coach. They're trying to get their stuff in order and prepare for how they're going to finish in the MEC, which is kind of wide open. I think the general consensus is Maryville's the favorite, but after that, it's a lot of teams lost a lot of pieces, and it's kind of a wide open conference schedule this year, and we'll see who that team is that kind of steps up to be that challenger to Maryville.
And that's always fun when something like that is up for grabs because it motivates all the other teams in that conference. But like I said, Spoofhounds got underway this week. We had some Bearcat football, Bearcat volleyball. Big week, though, overall, just for all of our sports in the area. John, can you kind of give us a take of what all we saw this last week?
The Spoofhounds, like you said, they got kicked off on Monday, and they didn't waste much time. Very successful week for the Spoofhound volleyball, went 2-0. Spoofhound golf, they won their big best ball tournament where they have a lot of teams, and Emily Long was the individual champion of it, and they took second as a team, but Emily Long and Laurel Wickersham, since it was best ball, they had the pairing, and they kind of dominated that, frankly. And then they won again on Wednesday when Cameron came to town for a dual meet. Softball went 1-1 on the weekend. They beat North Nottoway by 2, or by 1 actually. That was a very good game. And then they lost to Lathrop by 2. But the tennis team got a 9-0 victory, looked dominant doing it with a couple new faces at the top of their lineup. So that's very promising for tennis as we move forward. Really the only one that didn't get off to a great start, and it had nothing to do with the way they ran, but Spoofhound cross country, just because the weather didn't want to cooperate. So we had our home meet, the only home meet of the year, rained out. So that's unfortunate for those cross country kids and the fans that wanted to go out and see them. But
yeah, and that's a great thing because last week when we started out this podcast, we didn't have as great of news. We had the first week of high school football and didn't have as many success stories as we do this week.
No, and even those, and we haven't touched on the 8-man teams yet, but they showed some growth this year. I know Platte Valley was very happy with the way they came out and competed, even though they did lose a second game, so they're 0-2 now. All of our 8-man teams are 0-2, but they're kind of starting to figure it out this week, and there's a big matchup this week in 8-man actually between Platte Valley and Northwest Nottoway, both looking to get that first win of the season. And for both those programs who are in the rebuilding phases, that'll be a big game because you want to get that win under your belt and hopefully develop some confidence going into the second half of the season.
Yeah, and that's exciting, especially for those teams to kind of get that first win, and then you hope that whoever can pull that win out, that's kind of a fuel and a motivator to continue to grow throughout the season. Was there anything else this week in our local sports that you saw that was something big or anything coming up?
It's just going to be another week, and kind of everybody's got those games under their belt now that they can continue to build on, and hopefully now everybody's in the flow. It's just an exciting week overall in high school sports, and certainly college sports too, with that another Thursday night game coming up for the Bearcat football team.
Yeah, it's a great time of the year if you're a sports fan. Everything is really underway. Like you said, you kind of previewed some of the high school sports. We got our Bearcat football team back in action on Thursday. They are at Washburn this week. Bearcat volleyball heads off to their next road tournament, which is the Newman tournament. That's Friday and Saturday, the 7th and the 8th, And then on the 14th, your Bearcat volleyball team will be here for their first home opener versus Lindenwood at 6 o'clock on a Friday. So Bearcat sports, they will be kind of getting going, and Bearcat volleyball will be coming home. Soccer's going to keep rolling, and hopefully for some of these outdoor sports, we can kind of keep the weather nice for while they're playing, because we've had a lot of rain in the forecast lately.
We've been begging for rain all summer, it seems like, especially the farmers out there with their fields, but now all of a sudden the sports get rolling and Mother Nature decides it doesn't want to cooperate so much. But hopefully this week it can stay away for a little bit and we could get some of these games in.
Yeah, and like you said, especially like with cross-country kids, it'd be great. You always hate to see games get canceled, and it's exciting to see them all play. So hopefully we can get some rain when we need it and play some sports when the fans need to see it too. So that's pretty much it for this week in the Forum Sports Podcast. We'll definitely be looking ahead next week. All these games that we talk about, we'll be back next week to break them down and talk about how they went with all of our local area high school, as well as our Bearcat football, volleyball, soccer coverage, you name it, we will have it for you. So as always, I'm your co-host, Erin Sorensen.
And I'm your other co-host, John Dykstra.
And we'll be back next week for all the latest and greatest sports news.
Bringing you all the latest Nottoway County High School and Bearcat sports each week.
10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45.
Starring Erin Sorensen and John Dykstra on the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast.
He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field.
Coming to you from the campus of Northwest Missouri State University.